It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, October 7th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that thinks we got the Flyers roster down pretty good.
Think so.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit fanduel.com to get started. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, when we last spoke on Friday before the roster deadline that is today, we were thinking we pretty much knew what direction the Flyers were going in. We assumed that given the kind of Easter egg of Jett Luchanko being with the main Flyers squad during practice, him not playing in that final preseason game, that he would be the one to make the roster in that 23rd spot and that everybody else would get sent down. That is pretty much what happened. Now, we said it wasn't what we would necessarily do ourselves,
Right.
but that's what they would do, and thus it happened.
Right. I mean, my only thing here is, and again, just my opinion, and I've seen this a million times, you don't put Luchanko in there because you're weak at a position. That's on Danny Briere, and then it's on Torts to find somebody else. Because now you're asking him to make up for a deficiency in the roster at the age of 18. It's not a great plan.
You could look at it in two different ways, right? You can look at it like that, and you could also look at it as under the assumption that he will play less than 10 games and go back to junior, and they're gonna find other solutions to that issue for the remainder of the season, and go from there, which,
I can't
I
assume
think,
that yet, though. I get what you're saying, but like now I can't
yeah,
assume that based
I
on
think
the jargon
that's the
that's been
middle.
going around.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I don't think we know 100% what that decision will be. I think we can think it's likely, but I don't think we can say it's 100% guarantee. It'll depend on how he plays, right?
Right, right.
So if we make the assumption that he'll play 9 games or less and they make other choices, it's not the worst thing in the world. I think that, it was risky to some degree to put Ole Lixell and Anthony Richard through waivers. They cleared, so it was fine. And, it wasn't a big risk, but there was a small risk there.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Wha-
everybody was flooding waivers, so like they played
Yeah.
the odds on that one, and that's fine.
Yeah. And it worked out well for them. So, all's well that ends well on that front, I would say. But I think that, it was a risk. And I think that it would feel better to me if they had communicated to Lixell, let's say, particularly, that we're just giving the kid, a few game tryout. We're going to send him back to junior. You're the first call up back. Like, don't worry about it. Like,
Yeah. I don't know if they did that though.
yeah, that's what would make me feel better about the whole thing, especially if they're definitely going to play Luchanko less than 10 games and just send him back, which both of us have said is the best option for his development.
Again, nothing is definite at this point, and the coach's drive to want to make the playoffs is what's pushing him to do this too. Because that's in the back of his mind. He won't say it publicly now because he knows he has new goalies, but he still wants to make the playoffs. And that's how he's playing it. So in the back of his mind, this gives him the best chance right now. So that's what he wants. And that's why he said he would, you know, basically beg to keep Luchanko on the roster. And so again, I don't think that's the greatest plan, but I hope the kid does well.
Yeah, that's my next thing is, all that being said, I'm actually really excited to see him in some NHL games. There's some other guys that maybe I would have preferred first, but at the end of training camp, we talked about it last week that he was, one of the guys that really showed out over the summer. And I said particularly, he has increased in my estimation since being drafted. And I am really excited to see him play. Again, I still think sending him back at the end of a tryout, is the right way to go developmentally, but prove me wrong, Jet. Absolutely prove me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't show me anything in preseason that said he was going to be a regular scorer. And like if he were scoring even at a Mitchclough clip, which was terrific, uh, I would be acting differently. I'd be like, okay, I'm open to this. But he didn't do that. But he did just enough to stay with the club. But that's my issue is you got to do more than that in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. Now, if you look at, the rest of the list, obviously, it must be disappointing for Lixell, for Emil Andre in
Andre's, I
particular.
think, the one probably most disappointed.
Yeah, I think, that's where my perspective comes from, that I think Emil Andre, and to maybe a slightly lesser extent, Ule Lixell, could be more effective as NHLers at this time than Jett Luchanko. And that doesn't mean anything bad about Jet. It just means at this time, I think Emil
Yeah.
Andre in particular was more ready to play regularly in the NHL. And I just really hope he gets an opportunity sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, and again, I know the reaction that comes out of this, but you also have to take the player into account. Like Andre has plenty of opportunity to work overseas. If he doesn't get called up this year and the regular part of his contract runs out at 25, 26, even if he's still an RFA, he could just go back. Like he might just say, I'm never getting a chance on this team. And so they have to, in my mind, call him up for a stretch this year, or he may get that message, whether they're meaning to send it or not, because these guys have options and he might not stick around forever.
Yeah, and I will put like a very small asterisk, in at the end of everything we're saying, because roster adjustments can be made at game time,
Yeah, sure.
right? And so we never know if this is just like the submission roster and
Hmm.
things might change for the games on Friday. So just want to throw that out there as
No, that's
well.
fair. That's
Uh,
fair to do. We could only like analyze what's in front of us.
Well, exactly. This is what we know now. So who knows? Emil Andre or Ule Lixell could be starting in Calgary, let's say. We
Yeah.
have no idea. But I think that, yeah, based on what we know now, this is kind of where we're at. Obviously, with everybody else, I would say for the most part, it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Oliver Bonk got sent directly back to junior as was expected in this scenario, along with Denver Barkey, who just started skating again after his illness. Uh, Cooper Marody back to the AHL. He's been injured this whole time, as
Yeah.
was Samu Tuamala. So, but they're kind of back with the Phantoms. I will say now we're going to talk about the Phantoms tomorrow because it's another Phantoms Tuesday show. But just as a side note, Alexei Kolosov played the entire game on Saturday in the Phantoms preseason. So um, he's still around,
He's
and I
still
think that's
around. I'm not going to
important.
get too high or too low with that one,
Yeah,
but it's good that he's playing.
yeah, and the fact that he got that entire game,
Right.
I think says a lot
It does.
as well. We'll dig more into to him and the rest of the Phantoms discussion tomorrow, especially with all these guys, because some of the main Phantoms guys haven't played yet because they just got sent down, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there. I think when you look at, the last batch of players sent down to the Phantoms, there's a lot of tweener talent there for sure. And I think that that is the core group of guys that are going to have to show out the most with the Phantom. So not just Andre and Richard, but you're looking at Abels, you're looking at Adam Ginning, you're looking at Helge Grans. Is Helge Grans going to leapfrog Adam Ginning in the depth chart
He might.
here?
He
Yeah,
had
and
a
then
really good preseason. A lot of people saw that.
Yeah, Hunter McDonald as well. I think, is obviously going to continue to be part of the conversation, but he's got to like take a big step forward at the AHL level to prove that he's more than just like throwing a couple punches and hits, right?
Right. I think he's more than that, but I think he needs a couple of seasons in the AHL. I'm not looking for this quick Hunter McDonald thing based on what management's saying. I'm looking for what I think he needs in development, and I think he probably needs a couple of seasons in the AHL. I mean, for all we know, at that point in time, he might be replacing Risto because maybe at that point they could trade Risto because then his contract's not that big a deal. That's what you're looking at. That's why you develop
Yep.
guys to be there in the waiting.
Yep, absolutely. So, really interesting week ahead here as we look toward the first game. But now we have what the roster will be, at least officially, to start the season. Very exciting for the Flyers. Just a quick side note, we talked about the Devils game, the last preseason game. Kevin Labanc got a hat trick against the Flyers, and he got an actual contract from Columbus out of the deal, which is crazy and super cool for him.
Well, two things. That Columbus cap situation has not been settled yet because they're still under the floor where you could revenue share. But of course, they didn't choose what happened with Goudreau, right? That's a
Right,
tragedy.
right, right.
But that affects the cap.
Right.
And so there's not been any cap relief yet for that. So they may pick up a couple players if the league doesn't say give him some sort of special dispensation. But I do think LeBanc has earned it. He has
Yep.
shown he could score in this league, and I'm happy for him because I got to know him a long time ago, and he was a guy that obviously was scrappy during the preseason and shows that you can win a job.
Yep. I just thought that was interesting and
Yeah, yeah,
fun.
especially on another team, like
Yep. Yep. All right. We are going to dive into our season predictions just for the Flyers, not league wide. We'll get into that tomorrow, and we are going to do that coming up next. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because you can avoid all the busy work. I use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use it, the better it gets. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at indeed.com/locked on. Just go to indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Flyers. That's indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right. Like I said, we'll talk about the NHL as a whole with our season predictions tomorrow, plus Phantoms Tuesday. We'll answer your mailbag questions on Wednesday, as usual. So get them in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail, send us a message on Twitter, or comment over on YouTube. All right. So we're going to do a little bit of sort of cheating in terms of talking about the rest of the league, just because we have to talk about where the Flyers end up, right, with their point total and where we think they'll end up in the Metro division as a whole. And, if you look at last season for the Flyers, obviously, as we know, they just missed the playoffs with 87 points. The Caps, who were the bottom team to make the playoffs, had 91 points. The Rangers, who won the division, had 114 points. So, where does that put the Flyers, Russ, for this season?
So for this season, I'm looking at it, and I think they're going to end up with 85 points out of the playoffs. I think while the Devils were 2-1-1 against them last year, the Devils are much better. I think you could see that from every account. So I think they could grab another point or two. I think the Islanders will grab another point or two, and probably the Capitals. Just because you never know what's going to happen. It's always a new year. So I think they'll get 85 points. I think they'll be in 6th place, just where they were last year. It's just going to be a different year where the points fall a different way. But that's what I think. I think the 4 teams will make it. I think Rangers, Hurricanes, and Devils are the locks. And then it's between the Islanders, Capitals, and Penguins. I don't feel strong about the Penguins, so uh, I'd say it's between the Islanders and Capitals. I think that's where I'm at. Mostly, probably more leaning towards the Islanders and Capitals, and no Penguins. And same as last year, in other words.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because I think everything will cancel each other out in the wash, kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
That like the Pens, I think, are a little worse. The Caps are a little worse, but the Devils are a lot better, and the Islanders might be marginally better. And so all of that is going to come out in the wash in terms of
Right.
what that means in their games against the Flyers here. And so I think the only like difference that could be made is if the Flyers power play gets itself together and that
Hmm.
ekes the team out maybe 3 to 4 more wins
And it could.
this season, right? It very well could. Now, the penalty kill would have to stay at a similar level, right?
Yeah.
Other stuff has to stay at a similar level. So if the power play gets marginally better, Mitchkov puts a bunch of points on the board and everything else stays about the same, the Flyers could end up getting a few more points. Now, will that be enough to get them in the playoffs? I don't know because it's going to depend on those other teams, right? But they're going to be that one of those borderline teams again for sure, in
Yeah,
my
I
opinion.
think they're going to score more points and give up more points
Mm,
compared to
could
last year.
be,
That's
could
what I
be.
think they'll do.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at as well. So I think 85 points sounds pretty reasonable to me. I think it could be anywhere between 85 and 90.
Hmm.
Is kind of where I'm at. If I had to put money on a number, let's just say 88 because it's Eric Lindros's number. But like other than that, I think that's kind of, the 85 to 90 is the range that I'm looking at for sure here, given all of those factors. Now, looking at the Flyers team individually, who's your top scorer?
Top scorer Travis Konecny.
Now, I think the only way that that changes is if Mitchkov is such the dynamic playmaker and they don't put him on a line with Konechny and he doesn't get a lot of as much ice time with Konechny in order for TK to capitalize on that to some degree. And then maybe if the shot accuracy holds up, if you have like a Farabee or a Tippett that somehow overtake Konechny with point totals simply because of Mitchkov's playmaking. I think that is a possibility, but all things being equal, I think Konechny is the obvious choice.
Yeah, I still think it goes that way. I mean, the only way I think Mitch Kopp would be the top point guy is if he shoots more, and so far he hasn't. So we'll see how
Mhm.
that develops.
Yeah, I don't think Mitch Mitchkov will be the top point guy, but I do
Yeah.
think he's gonna get a bunch of assists, and
Yes.
whoever those assists help is gonna get a boost, right?
No question.
So it just depends on who's out there with him, when all is said and done, and they kinda settle on those lines. But again, as the season progresses, lines always change up. So, maybe that wealth will be spread around. And I think that, not that he'll be anywhere close to the top scorer on the team, but I do think Morgan Frost is gonna benefit
Yeah.
tremendously there. And so I think that, that's a good transition to the next category, which is most improved, right?
Hmm.
So who do you think will have the most improved season over last year?
Joel Farabee. I just think, he had a pretty good year last year, even though some wanted to sort of pick it apart. And I think he's
Right.
2 years out from the surgery, and I like what I see so far. So yeah, I'm going to go Farabee.
Yeah, I'm going to go. This is an easy softball pick, but Jamie Drysdale, just because like he was mostly hurt last
Yeah,
season,
that's why I didn't use him.
but I think that I feel like his impact will make a huge difference to this team this year, and I think that If we get that power play improvement that I was talking about earlier, he's going to be a big part of it. And I think that that is going to maybe be a pivot point for this team this season because expectations are pretty high for him this year.
They are. I mean, look, I'm hoping I get the same tax return next year, but I just might not. That's the same hope. That's the same hopes I pin on the power play.
Yeah. Um, in terms of a potential breakout season, I think that you maybe could put Drysdale in that category
But he would have
again.
to do better than what he's ever done in Anaheim. That would only be the
Right.
only way.
That's true. That is true. But do you have a different candidate for breakout season?
Yeah, I'll say Morgan Frost. I think he'll get to another level if he plays with Mitchkov. And so I expect that to happen, and I expect both things to happen.
Yeah, I think, I want it to be Morgan Frost more than anybody just because I feel like he has been
Well,
wrong.
clearly not more than me because you're picking somebody else.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that um I would have picked Morgan Frost, but I'm trying to
But
pick somebody else.
okay, all right, that's fair.
So you know, I really want to say Tyson Forster, and I know that he's kind of technically already had that season, but I feel like with Mitchkov, with the potential kind of rise of some other guys, Tyson Forster sometimes gets lost in the conversation.
Sure.
And I feel like he if he can match the level of all of this other conversation about Jett Luchanko, about Matvey Michkov, if he can match or exceed what he did last season, to me, that's a breakout season because that establishes himself as a core leader of this team in terms of production, as opposed to just kind of part of the shuffle,
Yeah, that
if
makes
that
total
makes
sense.
sense.
No, I think it makes great sense because he definitely could improve. And if he were to have like, I don't know, 35, 37 goals,
Hmm.
that's a big improvement.
Yeah, I think so, and I think he has the potential to do it. I think
He
when
does.
his confidence is high, he absolutely can do it.
Yeah.
So, I look forward to that possibility. In terms of the goaltending, a conversation we've had a lot of is game totals. So, let's, knocking on all the wood in the world, injuries aside, right? We're looking at Urson and Fedotov. Like, what do you see as their game totals when all is said and done this season?
Ursan, I think, will be at 57 games and Fedotov will get the rest.
That's exactly the number I had in my head is 57 for Ursan, which I think is a little high, but
But they're
not
not going to have a
so
choice.
right. I think as long as they map it out effectively
That's
and
the
don't
key.
overuse him, I think he can manage it. I think he'll be okay, but they have to make sure to not make him play like 5, 6 games in a row, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, yeah. It can't be like, down the stretch, he's going to play 8 of 9.
No, can't do it. Can't do it. So, I'm sure there will be a third goaltender, in reality
There
that will
always is.
play like, maybe 6 to 8 games of
What
the
was the one
season.
year when Steve McKenna played? It was like 6 or 7 goalies.
Oh my god, yeah, I think we had 8 goalies one
Maybe
year.
8. Yeah, I think 8. You might be right.
Yeah, so, hopefully the max we have is 3 that play games this
Right.
season. But I think that Urson ends up playing, about 57 games. I think that's spot on. All right. It is Monday, so we will have our favorite segment each and every week, Nemesis of the Week, coming up next.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, forget having to have dozens of tabs open. You can check on the latest stats, view live play by play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I would take the Buffalo Bills over the New York Jets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com.
All right. So, Russ, last week, the conversation for our nemesis of the week was around what the final roster was going to be, and I framed it as, the conversation will be Ole Lexell versus an eighth defenseman. Is this the fight we're going to have? Nope, that was not the fight we had. I mean, it was the conversation we had, but Jett Luchanko, as we talked about, is the guy that made the final cut here. For you went on a washer fluid rant, which
It
we
was
also
valid.
talked about it in the Q&A segment last week as well, because people were kind of giving you crap for complaining about washer fluid. But this week, I think for me, the nemesis has to be the long wait until Friday, because for the Flyers, and like we talked about last Friday, they have an unusually long gap between the last preseason game and the first regular season game. Most teams have a much shorter gap between that. And so this is a very long wait with, a lot of, to-dos for the team at practice. Torts mentioned it specifically that they have a lot of, game elements that they'll be working on this week. They're heading out early to Vancouver, doing some team bonding, getting ready for the season. So if you have a gap that big, I think that they're using it very effectively and in the best way that they can. So that is a very good thing. I just, for us, it's a long waiting game.
All right, so here's mine. I'm getting a little worn out from the Mannings and the Kelseys. Enough. There's just it seems like there's no products for anybody else to push because they're pushing them all. They can't push every product. And I bought none of them as a result. I have nothing against these guys. I like them all. I'm just sick of seeing them in commercials, and I don't want to see them in commercials anymore. I think they're going to burn themselves out, and I'm hoping that's what's going to happen because it's just getting tiresome.
So I take it you have not watched that TV show that Travis Kelce is in.
No, I heard he's in something, and maybe he's good. That would be okay. But these are commercials. This is different. I don't need to watch them eating cereal. I don't need the Mannings trying to push Hawaiian bread that I was never going to eat anyhow. Like none of that.
I assume insurance is involved in some
Yeah,
way.
insurance, I don't care about. I'm not picking your insurance because Peyton Manning's humming a tune. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I will say I am not a Manning fan by any stretch of the imagination, but Peyton Manning did a bang up job hosting Saturday Night Live, as
Oh, I'm
did
sure he did.
Travis Kelce. And I think that, I enjoy when they do those things.
But
Maybe
that's
in
occasional.
commercials. Yeah,
Commercials inundate your life.
that's fair. That is absolutely fair. Yeah. So, spread your wings, guys. Just maybe less so on ads. I know it's good money. They can't turn that stuff down. So I get it, but I can see how it would be annoying after a while.
I'm going to guarantee you there will be somebody or a few that feel the same way, and they love the Kelseys, and they'll still feel
Yeah.
the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, their podcast is a lot of fun. So that will do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow with our NHL predictions and our Phantoms Tuesday check-in. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can let us know your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.